Hey, tonight we step through smoke and fire into a time when survival meant smiling at the very people who wanted your head on a spike. You're not just anyone, you're a Tudor, born into a royal family that makes Game of Thrones look like bedtime stories. The halls are cold, the shadows crowded with whispers, and even your cradle rests on splinters of betrayal. And tonight, you're going to become the most feared woman in all of Europe. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, Mand, what time it is for you right now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes into a world reeking of blood and perfume. It's September 7th, 1533, and you, Elizabeth Tudor, have just been born at Greenwich Palace, under chandeliers heavy with wax smoke and ambition. The cries that greet your birth aren't joy, they're disappointment. You were supposed to be a boy, a warrior, a prince, but instead you're a squirming, red-faced girl. And your mother, Anne Bolognese, already calculating how to spin this dot. Anne wears the weight of a crown made of glass. Your father, King Henry VIII, wanted a son so badly he ripped England out of the Catholic Church to get one. That's why you're born into a country with severed ties to Rome, monasteries on fire, and prayers rewritten to flatter the king's whims. But no son means no satisfaction. And no satisfaction, that means danger. By the time you're 2 years old, your mother is dead-executed for adultery, incest, and treason. Whether she actually did those things or not, historians still argue. What matters is that she lost. One day she's kissing your cheeks and telling you you'll be queen. The next, her head is rolling in the Tower courtyard while you're declared illegitimate. That's your first lesson in power. It's loud, it's sharp, and it doesn't care about love. You're shuffled off to the countryside, away from court. Your half-sister, married daughter of Catherine of Aragon, hates you for being the reason. Her mother was cast aside. Your half-brother, Edward, when he's finally born years later, will outrank you just by breathing. You're the political afterthought, but you're watching, you're learning. At Hatfield House, you grow under heavy skies and heavier books. No silk dolls or fairy tales for you. You get Latin, Greek, and philosophy before you're 10. Your tutors are shocked. They call you remarkably precocious. You just call it survival. Because in a world where women get used, married off, or executed, knowledge is your armor and your father. He's terrifying. You only see him sometimes when his mood is good, when his court isn't full of intrigue, or when he remembers he still has a red-haired daughter. His eyes flicker over you like he's trying to figure out if you're worth the trouble. You curtsy, hold your tongue, and smile like a saint. You learn to read people the way other girls read Psalms. When you're 5, Henry marries his 6th wife. That's right, 6. Catherine Parr is kind. She brings you and Mary back to court, tries to make peace. She even lets you live with her after Henry dies in 1547. But peace, you'll learn, is always temporary in a Tudor world. Your father dies bloated, paranoid, and unloved. Little Edward becomes king at just 9 years old. Suddenly, the power vacuum starts sucking everyone in. Factions rise, schemes hatch, and you're 11, already a pawn in a game that will chew you up if you don't start playing better than the rest. One morning, a man named Thomas Seymour enters your life like a storm in velvet breeches. He's handsome, charming, and 20 years older than you. He also happens to be your stepmother's new husband and your guardian. This is where things start to get ... uncomfortable. Let's just say, history remembers him as inappropriately familiar. You're 14. He bursts into your rooms early, tickling you awake. He makes lewd jokes in front of servants. He even slashes your gown in jest. Catherine Parr sees it. She tries to manage it, but the damage is done. When Catherine dies in childbirth the next year, Seymour turns his full attention to you. It's creepy, it's dangerous, and it's political. Because if he marries you, he gets a royal claim. You see it coming. You write careful letters. You deny rumors. You escape by inches. Eventually, he's arrested and executed. That's your second brush with death before you're 16. You take the lesson, trust no one, especially not the charming ones. Your reputation tattered, but your resolve sharpened. The court begins to whisper about the clever girl with flaming red hair and a laugh too poised for her age. You don't just survive, study how the game is played. You don't cry in public. You don't speak more than necessary. You keep a mask that fits better than your dresses. The historian David Starkey once called you a political genius in petticoats. But that's not quite right. You're becoming more than that. You're becoming an enigma creature, neither child nor woman, neither saint nor seductress. A riddle wrapped in pearls, one odd detail people often miss. You keep a mirror in your rooms, but rarely look into it. You already know what they see. Your father's temper, your mother's ambition, your own eyes watching every movement with unnerving stillness. And as Europe erupts with wars, reforms, and crusades, you sit quietly in your chamber, turning the pages of Cicero and Plato, listening, waiting, because you know deep in your bone-deep Tudor intuition that your moment is coming. It just might kill you first. You wake to footsteps again, measured, deliberate, just soft enough to sound like a dream. But you know better. In the Tudor court, footsteps mean news, and news rarely comes wrapped in joy. You're 16 now, maybe 17, your age floats. Depending on the court's mood, and your future hangs like smoke above a battlefield today. The footsteps bring an invitation, or a warning, maybe both. King Edward VI, your half-brother, is dying. Tuberculosis, they say, though no one dares whisper the word too loudly. He's just 15, and already the weight of a kingdom has hollowed him out. His advisors panic, scrambling to keep the Protestant regime alive. And you're Protestant. But your sister Mary, she's not. She's Catholic to the bone, and stubborn enough to light a match in a powder room. When Edward dies in 1553, the court erupts. You sit perfectly still, because everyone knows what's coming. The throne should go to Mary Henry, the 8th's oldest surviving child. But Edward's protectors have another idea. They prop up a girl named Lady Jane Grey instead. Sweet, bookish, Protestant, and married to the Duke of Northumberland's son. Convenient, Jane is your cousin, and she doesn't want the crown. But wanting has never mattered much in your family. They crown her anyway. 9 days later, Mary rides in with banners blazing, and Jane loses her throne and soon her head and Mary. She becomes Queen. Queen Mary I, or, as history will eventually call her, Bloody Mary. You play it cool, smile, curtsy, even write letters declaring your loyalty. But you and Mary both know the truth. You're next in line. You're young, you're clever, and you're everything the Protestants want in a monarch. that makes you dangerous. Mary has you watched, and not in the fun you're trending on. Tudor Twitter way. More like men hiding behind tapestries watched. Spies infest your household. Servants suddenly forget how to bow. You spend your days embroidering, reading psalms, and choosing your words like a soldier picks landmines, and still the whispers come. A rebellion breaks out, the Wyatt Rebellion, led by men who don't want Mary marrying a Spanish prince. They want you instead. You deny everything. You swear loyalty. But Mary's not buying it. You're arrested, escorted to the Tower of London. Again, this time, you keep your face blank. You know the walls, know the ravens, know the stories whispered by the stones beneath your feet. Your mother died here. Now it's your turn to sleep under the same grey sky. You're lodged in the same chambers where Anne Boleyn spent her final days. Poetic, really. You touch the walls at night, wondering if her fingers once lingered there too. The ghosts don't answer, but the guards' boots do. They echo through your bones. For weeks, you write letters, delicate, careful, pleading, but never desperate. You maintain poise. Mary hesitates. Executing a sister isn't as simple as signing a scroll. The people love you. You're young. You're a Tudor. Blood is thicker than papal bulls, and Mary knows it. Still, she keeps you locked away. Rain smears the windows. Food goes untouched. And you watch. Always watching. One day a gift arrives. A potted orange tree. Tiny, fragile. A sliver of life amid the rot. It becomes your symbol. Quiet, growing, despite everything. You care for it like it's the only thing still listening. Eventually, Mary moves you out of the tower to house arrest in Woodstock. Less stone, more spies. You're allowed books, needlework, no visitors without approval. You learn to smile without showing teeth. One historical tidbit few people mention. You often wrote secret messages on bits of paper hidden in the bindings. Of books, scholars still debate whether that's true or just legend, but either way, it fits. You're a woman of margins of hidden thoughts and long games. Back at court, Mary marries Philip of Spain, his dear, foreign, and unpopular. You pretend to be thrilled, but the moment she can't get pregnant, Mary begins to unravel. She believes she's with child, her belly swells. Her cravings shift, but it's a phantom. Historians still argue whether it was a medical condition or psychological distress. But either way, it cements one thing. Mary will have no heir. The throne looms ahead of you like a cliff's edge. You walk toward it on eggshells. But you're getting closer. You receive a letter one spring morning. It's royal, formal, and terrifyingly light. Mary is ill. She's naming no successor, but the writings on the castle wall. Your guards relax, slightly. Your own servants begin practicing royal titles under their breath. And then, just like that, in November of 1558, Mary dies. You don't cry, not here, not yet. Instead, you sit beneath a great oak tree at Hatfield, the same estate where you once recited Latin to squirrels and buried love letters under rose bushes. An advisor kneels before you and says, "Your Majesty," you nod. Say only, "This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes." A crowd gathers. You stand. No husband, no son, no protector, just you, 25 years old. Crownless yet crowned. The throne isn't warm, it never is, but your spine is straight. Your pulse steady, they underestimate. You, because you're small, unmarried, female, but you know how to play a long game. And now, the board is yours. The throne smells like sweat and varnish. That's your first impression. Not incense, not roses, just the human panic of every monarch who sat here before you. You lower yourself onto it slowly, hands steady, spine like iron wrapped in silk. Around you, nobles shuffle, bishops murmur. Their expressions are mixtures of awe and suspicion. You don't blink. You're not here to be liked. You're here to rule. It's January 15th, 1559, Coronation Day. Your hair gleams, red gold, in the frosty morning light as you step through Westminster. The crowds roar. They call you Gloriana, our queen, the Virgin Queen. Of course, they don't know if that last part's true. Frankly, neither do your Privy Council. And you're not planning to clear that up anytime soon. You wear white symbol of purity, naturally with cloth of gold sleeves and an ermine-lined mantle that drapes behind you like a wave of conquest. The orb and scepter weigh heavy in your hands. They say they represent God's authority. You know better. They represent yours. And still, people wonder, will she marry? Will she hand this power to a man? You smile. You always smile. But deep inside, you hear your mother's voice and Bullen whispering from beyond her grave. Never let them take what they did not give. Your council is packed with men, some old, some clever, some already scheming. You appoint William Cecil as your secretary, your first true ally. He's cautious, brilliant, loyal. You'll trust him for 4 decades. Together, you begin stitching together a country torn apart by fire and faith. First challenge. Religion, always religion. England is Protestant again, for now. But your bishops are still half Catholic. Your nobles wear crosses under their doublets. And half the continent wants your head for heresy. You have to tread carefully. You reinstate the Act of Supremacy, making yourself supreme governor of the Church of England, not head to masculine to PayPal. You know optics, and you introduce a new book of common prayer. Moderate, vague, artfully uncomfortable for both sides. You don't want religious unity. You want just enough disunity that everyone's too busy muttering to stage a coup. It works, sort of. A French ambassador sends a note back home describing you as a woman of infinite cunning. He doesn't mean it as a compliment. You take it as one anyway. You move into Whitehall Palace, a cold, smoky labyrinth of velvet and secrets. Every corridor smells of beeswax and paranoia. You redecorate. Naturally, red and gold become your signature. You add mirrors, so many mirrors, and portraits of yourself with neck ruffs that could decapitate a small bird, and you begin hosting progressors, long royal journeys across the countryside. You ride side-saddle through muddy fields, staying in nobles' houses, charming peasants, dazzling local lords. The progressors aren't just royal vacations, they're surveillance tours. Every meal, every dance, every flirtation you're watching, calculating, testing loyalties. You have one great advantage: your voice, not just your speaking voice, though that's powerful. Sharp, low, like honey over gravel. No, it's the voice of someone who understands narrative. You're already writing your myth. Virgin, warrior, divine right in a jeweled skullcap, and to the horror of your advisors. You begin playing games with your suitors. Your court becomes a carousel of marriage negotiations. King Eric of Sweden sends you gifts and poems. You thank him sweetly and pretend you're considering a visit. The Archduke Charles of Austria offers a cautious proposal. You nod and request more details. The Valois brothers from France flirt. and flatter especially the Duke of Anjou, who's half your age and all lace collar. You tease him mercilessly by flirtation, and you're a master. Every court in Europe holds its breath, waiting to see which man will tame. You, none do, because you already told them, I am already bound unto a husband, which is the kingdom of England. Whether you truly mean it, historians still argue. But there's one man you don't tease, not in the same way. His name is Robert Dudley, your childhood friend, your favourite, your scandal. He's everything a Tudor woman is supposed to avoid: handsome, ambitious, already married. But when his wife, Amy Robsart, dies from a suspicious fall down a flight of stairs, your court goes feral. The whispers start immediately. Elizabeth killed her. They plotted it together. Now she finally marry her beloved Dudley. You don't. You can't. Your reputation is fragile. Your rule isn't stable enough. And there's that pesky issue of murderous optics, but Dudley remains in your court, at your side, always nearby. You make him Master of the Horse, then Earl of Leicester. You keep him close not because you trust him, but because you don't. A quirky historical detail. You had his rooms built right next to yours in the palace, with a secret passage connecting them. So, you know, ... subtle, but you never marry him. Never marry anyone, and with every year that passes, the Virgin Queen becomes more than a political slogan. It becomes your armor. A woman with no husband is a threat, but a queen married only to her country, that's a divine mystery. That's power, and you're only just beginning. Across the sea, enemies are gathering. Catholic plots, Jesuit spies, coded letters, and exiled queens stir in the dark, and you, in your pearl-draped gowns and fiery wigs, are preparing to meet them. Your enemies think you're just a woman. Soon, they'll learn you're something far more dangerous. The man smells like cloves and desperation. You keep your hands folded while he bows, his velvet doublet stiff with expectation. His name is Thomas Howard, 4th Duke of Norfolk. Important title, beautiful handwriting, terrible poker face. He's here to talk about Mary, that Mary, Mary, Queen of Scots. Your cousin, your Catholic, plotting, glamorously dangerous cousin. And just like that, the next phase of your reign slinks into the room, wearing satin gloves and holding a hidden dagger. Mary's story is tragic, tangled, and more dramatic than a Spanish opera. Daughter of James V of Scotland, widow of the French king, returned to her homeland to claim a throne to savage for her silks. Within a few years, her second husband, yes, second is, murdered. Her third is suspected of doing it. Scotland. Rebels. She flees across the border into England, and straight into your royal lap. You raise an eyebrow when she arrives, drenched in tears and political baggage. She wants asylum. She wants help. She wants your throne. Historians still argue whether Mary ever intended to dethrone you from day one, but let's be honest, she never exactly hid her ambitions, or her Catholicism. And worse, too many in Europe, she's the true queen, the legitimate heir. You were born of a marriage, declared invalid by the Pope. She wasn't, which is why you don't let her near London, or any weapons, or sharp cheese knives. You keep her comfortable, but watched, always watched. She bounces from manor to manor under protective custody. Think royal Airbnb, but with guards behind every curtain. Enter the Rodolphi plot. It starts small, as these things do. A few coded letters. A Spanish ambassador to Eager, a duke who thinks he can marry Mary and rule the country. that Duke, Thomas Howard, the sweaty one. He wants Mary. Mary wants your crown. Spain wants England back in the Catholic fold. You want them all to stop underestimating you. Your spymaster, Francis Walsingham, is already building his web. He catches wind of the plot through double agents, intercepted messages, and one very indiscreet priest who really should have used invisible ink. Howard is arrested, tortured, beheaded. Mary denies everything, her pen quivering with faux innocence. You don't believe her, but you don't kill her yet. Instead, you wait, watching, always watching. Meanwhile, Europe is foaming at the mouth. Pope Pius V issues a papal bull excommunicating you, declares you a heretic, a usurper, commands your subjects to rise up. Spoiler, most don't. They're tired of burning fields and dead neighbors. But Catholic powers abroad, they smell blood. Spain, France, the Papal States, they start sharpening swords and stirring ships, and at home the Catholics get bolder. Priests arrive in disguise, traveling as actors, tailors, even cheese merchants. Jesuits begin smuggling themselves into the country, spreading faith and rebellion like wildfire. You respond with laws, harsh ones. Harboring a priest becomes treason. Attending Catholic Mass, hefty fines. You're not trying to erase religion. You're trying to prevent war. Still, there are moments when you wonder if the mirror lies to you. Each morning, you sit as ladies dress, you 6 of them, sometimes more curling your wigs, pinning your ruffs, applying your cirrus, that white lead paste that makes your skin look like marble, beautiful, poisonous. You joke about it. I am married to my realm and my makeup, you once quip. But it's more than humor. It's strategy. Image is armor. You are the painting, the myth, the woman in pearls who never ages. One fringe detail you keep quiet. You often have headaches. Bad ones. Some say it's the lead in the makeup. Others whisper it's guilt or nerves or prophecy. You don't correct them. Your court becomes a hive of ritual and performance. Everyone plays a part, especially Robert Dudley, still buzzing around like a wasp in a jeweled bottle. He proposes, repeatedly. You always say, maybe. Your counsel hates. Him, the people gossip, but you keep him close. Not because you're in love, though maybe you are. A little but because he's yours. Loyal, familiar, someone you can afford to keep on a short leash. And then comes 1571, Walsingham intercepts. Another plot, the Ridolfi plot redux, unofficially. It confirms everything. Mary is actively encouraging rebellion from her cozy, guarded estate. This isn't just letters. This is treason. But you still hesitate. Killing a queen, especially one with so much support, could unravel everything. Europe might invade. England might fracture. And, well, you do like having a soul. Still, you begin preparing. Just in case, you increase your spies, create ciphers, build what's essentially MI6 with lace cuffs. You even fund a secret printing press to pump out Protestant propaganda. It's not glamorous, but it's effective, and you begin practicing speeches, war speeches, coronation ones too, just in case. You've started to think like a general, measured, lethal, and always aware of which wall might hide a listening ear. At night, when the palace quiets and only the fire crackles, you sometimes reread Mary's letters. Her handwriting is lovely, her words sugary, her tone always just a little smug. You keep a silver dagger by your bedside, just in case the letters become footsteps. Because you know deep in your bones that Mary's story will not end quietly, but neither will yours. The air inside the Tower of London is always cold. Doesn't matter the season. You know that chill. You've worn it like a cloak. But now someone else is feeling it. Mary, Queen of Scots. It's 1586. You've ruled for nearly 3 decades. You've dodged daggers, outlived plots, and aged into a legend. But Mary, she's become a symbol, rallying point for every Catholic rebellion. A would-be Queen of England, and the last person still foolish enough to think she can outplay. You, for years, you've kept her alive. Locked up, yes, but with nice curtains and a decent wine budget. She's written letters, sewn tapestries, and whispered to any noble with half a sword and a dream of glory. You've tolerated it, until now. Enter the Babington plot. Another mess of cloaked letters, intercepted ciphers, and foolish men playing at revolution. But this time, Mary writes back, and she's sloppy. Francis Walsingham, ever your quiet spider, is waiting. His agents intercept Mary's reply a letter approving Elizabeth's assassination, sealed in beer barrels, hidden in hay bales, coded, of course, but cracked. When Walsingham places that letter on your desk, it's not just paper. It's the final straw. Historians still debate whether the letter was baited, whether Walsingham wanted her to incriminate herself, whether Mary ever had a real chance. Maybe not, doesn't matter. You summon your council, they want her executed. Now, loudly, you pace, you glare, you shout, then whisper, then weep in the corner of your chamber, away from the velvet and the gold. Because no matter how dangerous she is, she's also your kin, a queen. A woman who reminds the world that female power is always provisional. You delay signing the death warrant. For days, then weeks. It sits on your writing desk like a loaded pistol. But finally tired, cornered, and painfully aware of your own legend, you sign it. With a quill that trembles only slightly. They execute her on February 8th, 1587. Fotheringay Castle. Cold morning. She dresses in crimson. The colour of martyrdom dies like a stage actress. Calm, dramatic, unapologetic. One quirky, almost absurd detail. The executioner botches the job. It takes 3 strokes to sever her head. And then, when he lifts the head to the crowd, Mary's wig comes off, revealing short grey hair beneath. The room gasps. Even in death, she defies expectations. You pretend? You didn't authorize it. You throw a fit, dismiss your secretary, curse the paperwork. Classic Elizabeth. Never admit, always maneuver. But the world knows you killed the Queen. And Europe howls. Spain is furious. The Pope declares you Satan in skirts. France winces but stays mostly quiet. And Philip II of Spain, he sharpens his. Nivzan starts building an armada. But back at court, the mood is strangely calm. No rebellions, no uprisings, no Catholics storming the gates. The people are with you, because they believe you didn't want this. You walk through the halls of Whitehall with a little more steel in your step. Not happy, but resolute. You've learned something important. Mercy has its limits. You increase your spy network. Walsingham agents are now everywhere. France, Spain, even inside the Vatican. Men send you coded reports with lemon juice ink and owl feather quills. You read them by candlelight with a magnifying glass and a glass of wine. You start receiving intelligence. Briefings. Sure, it's not called that yet. But let's be real, you're practically running the CIA. Before it was cool, and you know something's coming. Spain isn't building ships just to cruise around. They want you gone. England returned to Catholicism. And Philip, he's got fleets, fortunes, and that deliciously dangerous belief that God is on his side. You begin preparing, but quietly. Your navy, still scrappy and underfunded, is led by swashbuckling men with names like Hawkins, Drake, and Frobisher. Half of them are former pirates. The other half still are pirates. You don't mind as long as they sail under your flag and annoy the Spanish dot. One fringe fact. You actually knight Francis Drake on the deck of his ship, in armor, with a silver sword. While Spain weeps, your court evolves. It's no longer just velvet and sonnets. It's code-breaking, naval, engineering, and debates on ballistics over breakfast. You encourage theatre. Shakespeare is now writing for the masses, but you also encourage science, navigation, astrology, anything that keeps your mind one step ahead of the Catholics. You age, of course, but you do it deliberately. You add more jewels, more paint, more spectacle. The courtiers call you Gloriana. You cultivate the myth, because myths can't be assassinated. Meanwhile, you rehearse speeches, not just royal declarations, wartime speeches. Your voice has grown stronger, deeper. Every sentence lands like a blade. You feel it coming, the wind shifting, the tide rising, the storm brewing beyond the horizon. The Spanish Armada will come. That's no longer a question. The only question is what you'll do when it does. The sea is whispering secrets, not the soft kind, the kind that makes sailors cross themselves and nobles grip their goblets just a little too tightly. Word spreads through the taverns and palaces, alike the Spanish Armada is coming. You feel it before you hear it, like thunder still crouched behind the clouds. A vast fleet, over 130 ships, thousands of men, priests on board to reconvert England. Torture manuals packed beside communion wafers. Philip II of Spain calls it the enterprise of England. Sounds noble. It's really a floating cathedral with cannons. This is no pirate skirmish. This is Europe's greatest empire preparing to erase you. And you polish your speech notes and have your armor buffed. Your advisors panic, of course. Some want to retreat inland. Some suggest suing for peace. You pour a bit of wine and remind them gently, with just a little sarcasm, that you've been dodging death since you were a toddler. Besides, you've seen the Armada's plan. Thanks to your spies and some very nosy Dutch informants, you know they want to sail up the English Channel, link with the Duke of Parma's forces in the Netherlands, then invade by land. You can't stop them from launching, but you can keep them from linking. Your navy is smaller, faster, leaner, less armor, more attitude. Francis Drake becomes your hammer, wreaking havoc on Spanish ports before the Armada even sets sail. In Iwo Sea, he raids Cadiz and delays the invasion a whole year. You laugh when he calls it singeing the King of Spain's beard. And when the Armada does finally set sail in summer 1588, the whole of England exhales and waits. The Spanish ships are beautiful, gleaming, high-decked, stately. Think ocean cathedrals. Your ships, fast, maneuverable, armed with long-range guns and very sarcastic captains. You send word to your troops assembled at Tilbury. You've trained them for this, mostly farmers and blacksmiths in borrowed armor, but hearts pounding like war drums. Still, they're nervous. So you do what no woman has done before. You ride among them in battle armor. Picture it, silver breastplate, gleaming, white-plumed helmet tucked beneath your arm, a warhorse pacing beneath you. You speak, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England." Double quotes, boom, that line. It echoes down centuries. But in that moment, it ignites the troops. They cheer until their throats burn. For once, your gender becomes your weapon. Back at sea, the Armada struggles. English ships harass them all the way up the channel, never engaging directly, just keeping them from anchoring. You burn their supplies, split their formation, and then fire ships. That's right, you set your own ships ablaze and send them into the Spanish fleet at Calais. It's not just tactics, it's theatre. Firelight dances across their rigging. As chaos explodes, anchors are cut, formations dissolve, and then the weather turns. Of course it does. England's unofficial co-general, the storm. It smashes the Armada as they retreat northward. Spanish ships are wrecked on Irish shores, scattered like dice from a bad gambler's hand. Only about half the fleet makes it home. Philip's invasion is a soggy, flaming disaster. Your people celebrate like it's Judgment Day, and you don't strut. You wait, watch, reassure your people. Quiet strength, cold fire. Historians still argue whether the victory was mostly skill or mostly storm. But you don't care. You write letters praising God, ordering thanksgivings, commissioning paintings, a new iconography of power. Elizabeth with a globe under her hand. Elizabeth standing before a vanquished Armada. Elizabeth the Invincible, a quirky detail. In the famous Armada portrait, your fingers rest on a globe right over the Americas. Subtle, right? But let's be honest, the war isn't over. Spain doesn't disappear. Philip tries again, twice, smaller fleets, less ambition, more failure. But none of that matters. You've already won something bigger. Respect. Even your enemies now fear you. The Pope stops calling for your assassination. Catholic monarchs think twice before funding rebellions. You've crossed the line from mere monarch to myth, and your court, they lean into it. The image of Elizabeth becomes codified, virgin, radiant, eternal. Portraits stretch your neck, smooth your face, glorify your every wrinkle. You wear pearls by the pound and ruffs that could shade a village, but you don't relax. No, you've learned to well power never sleeps. You keep your inner circle close. Cecil still serves loyally. Walsingham, your spymaster, is now everywhere. There's a phrase people whisper now. Her Majesty sees all. Not an exaggeration. At court, people don't walk, they glide. Words are weighed, flattery sharpened. To diamond-cut edge, you encourage it to a point. A little sycophancy is good for the ego, but loyalty, that's harder to come by. You begin noticing. Shifts. Dudley is aging. His health falters. Others circled new favorites, younger men with better calves and poetic inclinations. One catches your eye, a certain dashing earl, but that comes later. 4. Now you return to Whitehall, victorious, unmarried, untouchable. You sit by your fireplace. Let your ladies unlace your armor and pour a glass of warm claret. The sea is quiet again, but it knows your name now. So does the world. The air in Whitehall Palace smells of cinnamon, rosewater, and ambition. The Armada may be defeated, but your court is far from quiet. Peace is just a pause between conspiracies, and you're too clever to mistake applause for safety. You spend your days wrapped in velvet and diplomacy, entertaining nobles, poets, and foreign ambassadors who all bow with different motives behind their smiles. Even the way they kneel says something. Too fast, desperate, too slow, insulting. You notice it all, but something deeper is stirring beneath the silk, the banquets, the powdered wigs. Your power is changing, no longer reactive, no longer fragile. You've become an icon, and icons are dangerous because they stop being human. The court begins to call you the Virgin Queen. You don't correct them, whether you are or not. Historians still argue. You drop hints. You give speeches. You leave questions unanswered on purpose. It's not about purity. It's about control. Mystery is the best kind of power, and you wield it like a dagger in a dance dot. And now it's time to make it official. January 15th, 1559 is long past. That was your coronation. But now, decades later, you need something greater to gloria la persona. No more half measures. You build it piece by piece. You stop appearing in public without full regalia. Pearls, gold, red wig, white paint, and a collar that could block the sun. You become untouchable. Literally, no one touches the Queen. You start to speak of yourself in the third person. At first, people chuckle. Then they don't. You create a schedule no one can break. Meals at fixed hours. Audiences timed by sandglass. You sleep surrounded by your ladies-in-waiting daughters of nobles who would sell their estates to keep them in your good graces. You begin replacing worn-out favorites with younger, prettier ones. And everyone knows they are decorative, not dangerous. You won't let another Dudley situation happen again. Still, Robert Dudley remains at court. He limps slightly, now old, jousting injury. You keep him nearby, assign him prestigious, but mostly symbolic tasks. When he walks into a room, you smile just enough. People whisper he still loves you. They're right. He dies in 1588, just weeks after the Armada. You're told while traveling. You shut the door, cry alone. A small box is found in his quarters after his death. Inside, your last letter. He kept it to the end. You keep the box. Meanwhile, art becomes your propaganda machine. Poets compete to flatter you. Edmund Spenser writes The Fairy Queen, an epic where you're literally cast as a magical protector of virtue. Painters depict you standing on maps, haloed in sunlight, orb and scepter in hand. You're not just a monarch, the very soul of England. One fringe detail: your portraits never show your age. In fact, you order that any artist who dares depict your wrinkles or weary eyes is banned from court. You have a mask of youth painting policy. Yes, that was a real thing. You've become the original airbrush. Even foreign leaders are charmed. Ivan the Terrible of Russia offers you a political alliance and possibly marriage. You dodge. He's too violent, too unstable, too sad. But the letter exchange is priceless. Meanwhile, the world shifts. England is no longer the fragile isle of your youth. Trade routes are opening. Privateurs bring gold, spices, and rumors from the New World. You begin granting charters, new colonies, new power, new headaches. But not everyone's thrilled, especially the old guard. The bishops grow nervous. Parliament grows restless. You've avoided naming an heir. You still won't marry. And people are beginning to realize you never will. Your cousin James of Scotland, possibly. But he's still far away, and half the court thinks he drools too much. You refuse to name him, or anyone. Why? Because the moment you name a successor, you become irrelevant. You once said, "Princes cannot be bound to give account of their actions." It's more than pride, it's strategy. No one prepares your funeral while you're still on the throne. Still, your refusal worries people, and it breeds conspiracy. People start wondering, what happens if she dies tomorrow? What if she's poisoned, assassinated? So, naturally, the plots keep coming. One involves poisoned gloves, another involves a cursed ring. You respond with a smile, an arrest, and sometimes a very public execution. Let them see what happens to traitors. But you also know when to forgive. A young playwright, Christopher Marlowe, pens a few plays that flirt with blasphemy. He's arrested. You have him released. Why? Because his words make people listen. And a queen needs ears. You surround yourself with brilliant minds. Francis Bacon, philosopher, scientist, legal reformer. John the mathematician, astrologer. They help shape the New England, even if some of their theories are, well, eccentric. One day, D explains to you that your birth aligns with celestial events that suggest divine rule. You raise an eyebrow, sip your wine, and say, naturally. But deep down, you like it. The myth, the magic, the belief that you are the reason England holds together. Because, in a way, it's true. You've become more than a queen. You are Gloriana, timeless, untouchable, and more feared than any king alive. You're older now, but you'd never admit it aloud. The mirrors in Whitehall are either too kind or carefully angled. Your walk is slower, your temper sharper. Still, no one dares mention your age. Not unless they enjoy grain storage in Berwick-upon-Tweed. Time is beginning to tug at the edges of things. But one new presence jolts the court into life again. The Earl of Essex. Robert Devereux. Tall, dashing, reckless. He's Robert Dudley's stepson, and you know it the moment you meet him, same smouldering ambition behind the smile. Except this one's younger, bolder, and far more dangerous. He's 20, you're 55, and no, that doesn't stop anyone from talking. You promote him quickly, too quickly. Within months, he's master of the horse, then privy councillor, then general. He kisses your hand with dramatic flair, writes poems about your eyes, bursts into your bedchamber without knocking a scandal for the ages. You throw a slipper at him, he laughs. You forgive him. Your court watches this soap opera unfold with thinly veiled horror. But Essex brings something you've missed: fire, unpredictability, a reminder that you're still alive. He becomes your new favorite. The others grit their teeth. But Essex isn't Dudley. He lacks caution and patience. He doesn't understand that love at court is a weapon, not a wedding vow. He wants power, real power. You hand him ribbons. He wants swords. When you send him to Ireland in 1599 to quell rebellion, he fails spectacularly. He disobeys orders, makes private truces, marches in circles, and worst of all, returns without permission, bursts into your chamber once again. This time, you don't laugh. You strike him across the face. The court holds its breath. That moment, the beginning of the end for Essex. Still, you try to forgive. You always try first. But Essex doesn't take the hint. Instead, he gathers allies, young nobles, disappointed fortune hunters, and launches a "let's be generous" spontaneous demonstration in London. He calls it a protest. You call it treason. Your spies are ahead of him. They've read the letters, heard the whispers, bribed the guards. Essex is arrested, tried, and eventually executed. February 25th, 1601. Your hand doesn't tremble when you sign the death warrant. But alone that night, you don't sleep. He'd once sent you a ringer token to beg mercy if he ever fell from favor. Legend says it never reached you, that a jealous courtier kept it hidden. Historians still argue whether the ring even existed. Doesn't matter, you believe it did. You withdraw, the court continues music. Banquets, new plays from that rising star Shakespeare, but you attend less and less. You stare at the hearth longer. Let the courtiers chatter without interruption. When they call you Gloriana now, it feels like a name from a different life. Even your appearance changes. The white makeup gets thicker, the wigs taller, the symbols of power more extravagant, because inside you're tired. You once outwitted popes, seduced kings, shattered empires, but now you're losing favorites to age, betrayal, and time. Still, you never name an heir. Not yet, Parliament asks. Your councillors beg, but you hold the line. The moment you name one, you cease to be queen. You become a stepping stone. Besides, there's no perfect choice. Your cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, is dead now, executed on your orders after years of imprisonment. You had to do it. She was a threat, a rallying point for Catholic rebellion. But still, the shadow of it lingers. You ordered the death of a crowned queen. Not something even you can forget. Her son, James VI of Scotland, is, well, complicated. Protestant, yes. Smart, possibly. Slightly gassy, definitely. But naming him publicly would be risky. What if someone decided to speed up the transition? So, you let it hang, like everything else. You still attend the occasional council, still receive foreign ambassadors, but they notice your energy waning. The way your fingers tremble when you lift a goblet. The long pauses between thoughts. The public doesn't see it. Your image remains untouched. Your portraits grow even more regal. One shows you in a crimson gown, fingers stretched over a map of the world. Another places your crown glowing like a halo. But within the walls of Richmond Palace, you begin staying in bed longer. Your ladies in waiting are instructed not to move you. You lie awake for hours, eyes fixed on the ceiling, muttering fragments of memories. Dudley's laugh, Essex's ring, the smell of sea spray during the Armada. People start whispering, the Queen is fading. And still you don't name a successor. You begin seeing ghosts. Or at least people think you do. You talk to the corners of rooms, to your own reflection. You hold conversations with long-dead courtiers. One fringe report from a maid says she saw you scolding an invisible councillor for blocking my marriage to the Tsar. Another claims you whispered "I forgive you" to the shadows. Poetic, maybe true, possibly. Eventually, your council forces the issue. They ask again, gently, firmly, daily. And finally one evening, when the fire is low and your voice little more than gravelly murmur, I suppose James has a good claim. That's it. No ceremony, no official proclamation. Just a whisper. Enough, James is told. He prepares. The wheels begin turning. But they do not dare move too quickly. You are still alive, still queen. End, despite everything, despite war, betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness, your grip on the throne remains unbroken. You once said, "Though God hath raised me high, yet this I count the glory of my crown, that I have reigned with your loves." And somehow, even now, even near the end, that remains true. You haven't just ruled England, you've transformed it, and it will never be the same again. The rain falls softly against the windows of Richmond Palace. Grey skies press down, smothering the light, making the candles flicker even at noon. You lie still, surrounded by velvet pillows, layers of quilts, and the gentle murmurs of your ladies in waiting. They don't dare speak louder. No one wants to disturb you, not because you're resting, but because you're thinking. You haven't spoken much in days, haven't eaten. Your long fingers, once so quick to sign treaties and snap fans in irritation, now barely twitch on the coverlet. You're drifting, but not gone. What's keeping you tethered is something more than life. It's unfinished business. You stare at the tapestries, the ones with unicorns and hunters and mythical gardens. They used to make you smile. Now they just remind you of a world that never was. Sometimes, in the silence, you hear voices, not your courtiers or caretakers. No, these voices come from deeper places. Dudley's laughter in your ear, Walsingham's low warnings, Essex still apologizing, maybe, or maybe just reciting bad poetry. You remember a time when England was a backwater, laughed at by European courts, threatened by invasion, religiously fractured, politically fragile. Now it commands respect. No one dares ignore the English anymore. Not since you took the throne. You remember your coronation, gold cloth, cheering crowds, your feet aching in those damn shoes. You were 25, terrified, but you smiled, and the world believed in that smile. They still do, but even now, near the end, you cling to one thing above all. Control. You haven't named a specific day, haven't called for a priest. You still wear your wigs and makeup when the mood allows. Because until your last breath, you are the queen. Your council waits. They tiptoe outside your chamber. The throne may soon be empty, but no one dares reach for it just yet. Because, as long as you're breathing, you're still Elizabeth Regina. Historians still argue whether your final days were lucid or lost in hallucination. Some say you refused to lie in bed, standing for hours until exhaustion took you. Others say you wept openly, asked forgiveness, clutched rings and letters like holy relics. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. One strange detail: a courtier swears that in your final week you recited the names of every English county. Slowly, as if you were walking your kingdom one last time, step by step. And maybe you were. The day comes, you don't rage, you don't cry. You simply grow still. Your eyes, once brilliant, now glassy, fix on the corner of the ceiling. You whisper something too quiet to catch. Maybe a name, maybe a prayer, maybe just air dot, and then, just like that, you let go. March 24th, 1603, 70. Years old, 40-4 years on the throne. England has never seen a reign like it. The news spreads by dawn. London hushes itself. The bells toll. Shops close. Men remove their hats in the street. Women weep in church pews. Even your enemies, especially your enemies, pause in stunned silence. Because the Virgin Queen is gone. No husband, no child, number, heir of your own blood. But your legacy, colossal. You've ruled through one of the most dangerous centuries in European history and turned a vulnerable Ireland into a power player. You've overseen the flowering of English culture, funded voyages to the New World, fended off assassination, rebellion, and war. You've stared down popes, kings, an entire armadas, and won. James VI of Scotland is summoned. He will become James I of England. The crowns united. The next chapter begins, but no one forgets you. Your body lies in state, draped in velvet and surrounded by flickering candles. Your funeral is grand, cold, ceremonial. Trumpets blare, nobles weep, crowds throng the streets. You are buried in Westminster Abbey, in the same tomb as your sister Mary. Yes, the same Mary you once imprisoned. On the tomb, a Latin inscription, consorts both in throne and grave. Oh, the irony, but they also carve this. She reigned gloriously and died peacefully. Finally, your face becomes myth. Gloriana, the fairy queen, the woman who married her country. But you weren't myth. You were flesh, bone, fire, fury. You were the most feared woman in Europe and the most loved. You once told Parliament, "I am your queen, I am your servant, I am your mother," and England believed you. You may have died childless, but you left behind a nation reborn, and every little girl who reads your story, every misfit, rebel, scholar, and survivor feels a spark of you in their spine. You're not just history, you're a warning, you're a promise. And centuries from now, when people whisper about power, about greatness, about impossible odds, they'll still whisper your name, Elizabeth. You've left the building, but you're not leaving the story, because now you've become legend. You know how this works. The minute you die, the ink starts flowing. Courtiers and chroniclers scramble to write the true life of Queen Elizabeth. They argue over your character, your choices, your so-called virginity. Everyone wants to claim they really knew you. Spoiler, they didn't. But the pens don't stop. Within a year, you're already a literary trope glorious Gloriana, the radiant virgin queen. They paint you as near divine, a creature of light and virtue, untouched by mortal sin. Which is a little ironic, considering you once threw a slipper at Parliament and told a bishop to go to the devil. Still, they need a myth. England's about to be ruled by a Stuart Scotsman. At that hand, people miss your drama already. You were unpredictable, sure, but at least you spoke your mind. James, by contrast, prefers hunting stags and quoting the Bible for fun. The poets immortalize you. Spenser had already turned you into the fairy queen. Shakespeare, whom you maybe met, once crafted queens in your image. Clever, commanding, sharp as a stiletto. But while the artists adore you, the real story's more complicated. You left behind a fractured court, a treasury in debt, a long list of enemies and even longer list of spies. England's holding its breath, wondering whether the magic dies with you. Still, it's hard to argue with your results. You took a torn country, barely holding itself together after your father's rampages and your sister's burnings, and you gave it 44 years of relative stability. Foreign diplomats hated you but feared you more, and you knew that was better than being pitied. Your image becomes state propaganda. Literally, the rainbow portrait is painted after your death, showing you in a gown embroidered with eyes and ears, because yes, you see all. There's even a serpent hidden in your sleeve, a not so subtle reminder that you weren't always kind, but you were always clever. And then there's the Armada story. That glorious summer when you stood before your troops at Tilbury in armour, declaring, "I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Chills every time. Never mind that you didn't actually lead any battles, or that the storm did most of the work sinking the Spanish fleet. The point was, you showed up. You stood with your people, and that image of a woman alone, facing down the mightiest empire in the world, stuck. But let's not pretend you were a saint. You authorized executions, crushed rebellions, raised taxes. You hoarded power like a dragon hoards gold. You refused to name an heir until the very end, keeping everyone guessing just a little too long. Some argue it was irresponsible. Historians still argue whether you delayed out of caution or sheer vanity. But here's the thing, every move you made, even the harsh ones, came from the same drive to protect England. And maybe, just maybe, to prove that a woman could not only hold power but wield it better than any man ever had. You made mistakes, plenty, Essex's rise and fall. Your excruciating indecision over Mary, Queen of Scots. Your blind spot when it came to court favourites. But you also made decisions no one else dared. You faced wars, assassins, excommunication, and plague, and you kept the machine running. You were Europe's most eligible bachelorette for decades. Kings and dukes lined up like hopeful contestants on a royal dating show. You parried them all with grace, charm, and when needed, a firm absolutely not. You turned your singleness into a superpower. Married to no one, but symbolically married to your people. Still, the whispers persisted. Did you really die a virgin? Let them whisper, you knew the truth. Whatever it was, but what matters more, that no man ever ruled beside you. No prince shared your throne. No husband signed your decrees. You ruled alone, and that terrified everyone. Even now, centuries later, when people debate powerful women, your name always surfaces. Not because you were perfect, but because you were unforgettable. The Virgin Queen, the Lioness of England, the last Tudor. Even your death has symbolic flair. You passed just as winter ended, just as the first buds of spring were appearing. The season changed with you, and your successor. James inherits your crown, your debts, your enemies, and your impossible shadow. He tries to unite England and Scotland, tries to maintain peace, but there's no sparkle, no drama, no thunderclap speeches in armor. He's not you, no one will ever be. And yet you didn't just rule, you built a stage, a world in which genius could flourish. Shakespeare, Marlowe, Raleigh, Bacon, they bloomed because you let them, protected them, funded them. Let their words and voyages shape an era. They call it the Elizabethan Age. You didn't just survive history, you made it, you once said. 1,000 eyes see all I do. Maybe so, but now 1,000 stories tell who you weren't. Each one adds something to the myth. The crown rests heavy on the next head, but your ghost still walks the halls of power, tapping heels on marble, silencing rooms with a glance. You are not done, you are just changing form. So here you are, dead, buried, immortal. But let's rewind just a bit, because if you want to understand why you were the most feared woman in Europe, you need to know what they were so afraid of. Spoiler, it wasn't your armies, it was you. Your mind, your ability to twist politics into performance, to read a room like it was a confession, to wield femininity like a weapon and masculinity like a mask. You were unpredictable in the best and worst ways. You had the uncanny ability to make people fall in love with you. Even when you were sending them to the tower, ambassadors wrote letters dripping with equal parts awe and frustration. She smiles, yet means something else, said one. She listens, but gives nothing away. They couldn't figure you out, and that made them nervous. See, Europe was used to queens who reigned briefly, married quickly, and ruled only through their husbands. You, on the other hand, told the Pope to go jump in a lake and then made England one of the most powerful Protestant states on the continent. You weren't just a monarch. You were an anomaly, and anomalies are dangerous. The Catholic world especially didn't know what to do with you. A Protestant queen, unmarried, childless, in charge of a kingdom that had recently flipped back and forth between faiths like a drunken tavern brawl. That was chaos. Unholy chaos. Pope Pius V went so far as to excommunicate you in 1570. A formal declaration. You were not just a heretic, but an illegitimate ruler. He basically told your subjects it was morally acceptable to depose or assassinate. Big mistake. Instead of weakening your grip on power, the papal bull only solidified your people's loyalty. It stirred English nationalism. Suddenly, this wasn't just about religion, it was about sovereignty. Your sovereignty. You leaned into it. You made speeches about unity and loyalty. You visited cities, gave gifts, flashed that 1,000-watt smile. You made it personal. You were England, and your enemies hated how well it worked. Spain, in particular, was losing patience. King Philip II had already tried courting you. Remember that awkward proposal after he'd been married to your sister Mary? Yeah, no thanks. You left him on red. Politely, of course. But after the excommunication, he went full villain mode. Funded Catholic rebellions, backed plots against you, and eventually launched the Spanish Armada. Here's the part where we revisit why they feared you. Because you weren't just playing defense. You were playing chess on 12 boards at once. Spies, counter-spies, informants tucked into every major court in Europe. Your spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham, basically invented modern intelligence networks. Codebreakers, double agents, secret InQ had it all. Walsingham's web reached into the Vatican. You knew who was plotting against you before they did. So, when Mary, Queen of Scots, your Catholic cousin, became the focus of conspiracy after conspiracy, you had the receipts. You held her under house arrest for nearly 2 decades, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, you signed her death warrant with a trembling hand. Historians still argue whether you meant to kill her or were pressured into it, whether the warrant was carried out too quickly for you to intervene, whether you regretted it. But the message to Europe, crystal clear: touch me, and I will touch back. Hard. You turned executions into performance art, propaganda, just enough mercy to look noble, just enough cruelty to remind everyone where the line was. And yet, you rarely ruled by terror. You ruled by presence. You didn't need to lash out constantly. One raised eyebrow could freeze a courtier mid-sentence. One offhand remark could end a career that the Spanish called you the Jezebel of the North, the French, the Maiden Dragon, and the Vatican, the English heretic queen. But back home, you were Bess, good Queen Bess, the people's monarch. They toasted to your health in pubs and whispered your name in prayers. You scared Europe because you didn't need them. You built something new, an England that didn't apologize, a court that revolved around you, not some dynasty-hungry nobleman, a nation that was increasingly proud, literate, and ambitious. And Europe watched in horror as your little Protestant island began to look ... stable, successful, even golden. You flipped the script. The world expected you to fail. You were a woman, born under scandal, inheriting a bankrupt kingdom surrounded by enemies. They expected you to be a puppet, a placeholder, a soon-to-be footnote. But you were the fire that wouldn't go out, and now they couldn't stop it. So yes, they feared you, not because of your sword, but because of your mind. You wake up before dawn most days, if you even sleep at all, because ruling England, it's not a job, it's a performance. And every moment of your waking life, you're center stage. The courtiers are watching. The foreign ambassadors are reporting back. Your subjects are squinting at your portraits, reading meaning into every ruff and ribbon. And you're making sure they see exactly what you want them to. That's the secret, isn't it? You understand the power of spectacle better than anyone in Europe. You craft your image like a playwright crafts a scene. Every outfit, every gesture, every word calculated, symbolic, immaculately rehearsed. You're not just a queen, you're an idea, and ideas are harder to kill than people. Take your wardrobe, for instance. You wear pearls by the pound, embroidered, gowns that shimmer like sunrise, sleeves so wide you could smuggle a chihuahua in each. You once wore a dress entirely embroidered with eyes and ears just to remind people. You're always watching and always listening. One fringe courtier whispered that your outfits could fund a war. He wasn't wrong. You create a myth, Elizabeth the Eternal, the Virgin Queen, the Gloriana, a goddess on earth, but the real you, she's tucked behind the curtain, pacing like mad, worrying about grain prices and Irish rebellions, and whether your latest naval captain is a pirate or a patriot. Spoiler, he's usually both. Still, you play your part. The court becomes your theatre, the Privy Council your writer's room, and the entire country your captive audience. But that audience isn't always kind. The older you get, the harder it is to maintain the illusion. Your teeth begin to blacken from sugar. Your face, once radiant, needs layers of ceruse, that deadly white lead paste, to stay porcelain. You start wearing wigs, high collars, jewelry heavy enough to anchor a ship, but you never stop showing up. There's a quiet terror behind your eyes now, because you know the minute they stop believing in the image, they'll come for the crown. So you keep dancing. Your royal progresses continue, even when your feet blister inside those jeweled slippers. You kneel before the altar in ornate robes, even when your back aches. You smile through grief, through heartbreak, through betrayal. Every year, your birthday is celebrated like a national holiday. Pageants, poems, fireworks. England loves you, or at least, it loves her, the untouchable version of you, and still, you wonder if it's enough, because ruling as a woman means there's always a sword over your head, always someone whispering that you're too emotional, too proud, too alone, always someone suggesting that the kingdom would be better off if you just picked a husband already, but you never do, and that decision becomes your legacy. You flirt with the idea endlessly. Suitors from France, Sweden, Austria, even Russia. One after another, they come, pose, flatter, and fall short. Each one is dangled in front of Parliament like bait. And each time you step back just before commitment, you keep everyone guessing. Historians still argue whether you ever intended to marry or whether the entire performance was a diplomatic strategy, a way to maintain alliances without surrendering. Power, whatever the truth, the result is the same. You remain untaken, and Europe loses its mind over it, because a woman who doesn't belong to a man is threatening. A queen who doesn't need a king is dangerous, and a monarch who rules through spectacle, silence, and sheer force of will, well, that's downright terrifying. The older you get, the more the image matters. So you commission portraits, dozens of them, but you make the artists follow strict rules. No aging, no shadows, no wrinkles. Your face must always be timeless, your eyes ageless, your hair like flame. One artist tries to paint you realistically once, just once. His work is mysteriously destroyed, his name quietly scrubbed from court records, message received. There's something sad and magnificent about your devotion to image. You trap yourself in amber. You freeze time around you. You become legend in your own lifetime. And yes, you're tired, but you'd never admit it, because you know what happens to women who falter in power. You saw it with your mother, with your cousin Mary, with queens across Europe who ruled briefly, married poorly, and died young. You won't be one of them. You'll die standing if you have to, and when you do, you'll be remembered not as a woman, not even as a queen, but as a force. One scholar, centuries later, would write, Elizabeth was England and England, Elizabeth. They feared your mind, your body, your choices, your refusal to conform, but, above all, they feared your ability to make yourself unforgettable. And you succeeded. You don't sleep much anymore. Not because of ghosts, although, let's be honest, there are plenty of those lurking in the hallways of your memory. It's more the weight, the sheer gravitational pull of being Elizabeth, Regina, monarch of England, Ireland, and a growing empire across the sea. Every time you close your eyes, a name floats up from the dark dot. Essex. You remember the boy when he first came to court, brilliant, brash, with a jawline sharp enough to slice beef. The court adored him. You adored him. But then again, you'd always had a weakness for beautiful, arrogant men who thought they could outmaneuver you. You gave him everything. Titles, land, a seat on the Privy Council. And he gave you headaches. Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, thought flattery and swagger were enough. He thought he could raise an army in Ireland without permission. He thought he could barge into your chamber uninvited, catch you without your wig, your corset, your armor. He thought wrong. Still, you forgave him, again and again, because you saw something in him, maybe a ghost of Dudley, maybe something more painful, youth, the kind that slips from your fingers faster every year. But Essex wasn't just reckless, he was dangerous. When he staged a rebellion in 1601, yes, an actual, armed rebellion, you had no choice. You signed his death warrant with a steadier hand than you'd used for Mary, Queen of Scots. Historians still argue whether you hesitated, whether your hand shook, whether your tears smudged the ink. Some say you kept the ring he gave you. Some say you smashed it to pieces. You never say anything. That's your trick. After all, the things you don't say become just as powerful as the things you do. And your silence about Essex, deafening. He wasn't the first to fall from your favor. He wouldn't be the last, because loyalty at your court was like walking a tightrope over a pit of gossip, greed, and sharp steel, and you were the one holding the scissors. But behind closed doors, you're not always so composed. There are moments when the masks crack, when the velvet walls of your chamber press too close, when the courtier's flattery feels more like knives than compliments. You stare at your reflection, what's left of it, the rouge, the lead white, the glued-on red hair, the real face underneath. You barely recognize her. That girl from Greenwich, the one who read Cicero in bed and dreamed of ruling not as a woman, but as herself. She's still in there, somewhere, but these days she mostly watches, especially when the empire starts to grow teeth. You hear the whispers, new ships, new colonies, new wealth flowing in from strange lands. Men like Walter Raleigh, Francis Drake, and John Hawkins, they sail into the unknown and return with gold, spices, and the occasional scandal involving genocide. You don't ask too many questions, because you understand the game. Exploration is the new battlefield, trade routes are the new swords, and England has finally found its sea legs. And yet, there's a strange irony to it all. You've been queen for over 4 decades longer than anyone expected. You've steered your ship through religious wars, plague outbreaks, assassination attempts, and one very salty armada. You've made England rich, but you are poor in ways no one can see. Your body aches, the jewels feel heavier now, the fanfare seems hollow. Your council meetings drag on, your voice, once a lion's roar, cracks like old parchment. You begin to see ghosts not just in the corridors of Whitehall, but in the corners of every memory. Your father, with that booming, terrifying laugh, your mother, silent beneath the blade, your brother, so frail, your sister, so cold, your lovers, your rivals, your traitors, your friends, and Dudley, always Dudley. His death nearly broke you. You kept the letter he wrote you on his deathbed. You carried it with you like a talisman. You never married not after him, not ever. Some say it was political strategy. Others say you simply never recovered. Truth, you loved him. You just loved England more. You always chose England, even when it hurt. Even when it hollowed you out from the inside like a carved idol. And now, as the days stretch longer and your feet grow slower, you begin to wonder what happens after you. James of Scotland waits in the wings, watching. Your court holds its breath. You refuse to name an heir, even as your strength fades. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's fear, maybe it's the knowledge that the second you name a successor, you become history. And history, as you know too well, is a story told by people who never really knew you. You don't want to fade, you want to last. So you keep dressing up, keep holding court, keep giving speeches, even when your throat burns and your hands tremble, because the show must go on. And you, my dear, are still the star. The palace grows quieter now. Not silent palaces are never silent, but subdued, like a theatre after the actors have taken their bows and the audience has begun to file out. Servants tiptoe more softly. Courtiers speak in half whispers. Your ladies fuss over your hair and paint your cheeks with increasing care. But you can feel their worry even beneath the powder. You're fading. And everyone knows it, but they don't say it. No one dares. You, after all, are still Queen Elizabeth. You still sweep into the chamber in gowns so grand they require a small army to lift. You still deliver speeches with thunder in your voice, even if your legs tremble beneath the velvet skirts. You still rule, and yet something's changed. You feel it most in the mornings. It takes longer now to rise. Your joints are stiff, your appetite's gone. Sleep, when it comes, is filled with memories, not dreams. They swirl and taunt and whisper of what could have been, and worst of all, you're lonely. You've always been alone, technically, but now it seeps into your bones, like a cold you can't shake. You have no husband, no children, no confidant left. Most of your old friends are dead. The new faces at court all look at you like a legend who might shatter if they speak too loudly. Even your enemies are gone. You outlasted them all, except the one enemy that always wins. Time, your doctors. Prescribe everything from wine-soaked herbs to boiled gold to keep your strength up. You smile and nod and take their tonics, then spit them out when no one's looking. You've never needed their potions. You've survived on willpower and wit for 40 years. But now even you start to wonder how much longer you can keep pretending. Historians still argue over when your decline began. Was it after execution, after your final speech to Parliament, after the death of yet another trusted friend? There's no clear answer, but you feel it. You start to withdraw from court life. The brilliant pageants fade. You stop ordering new gowns. You wear the same faded wig, the same stiff white ruff. You spend hours staring out the window of Richmond Palace watching the Thames roll by, slow and endless. You ask to sleep on the floor. Your ladies protest, of course, but you insist. I shall have no pallet, you murmur, but here on the ground. They whisper behind fans, but no one can sway you. You refuse a bed. You refuse rest. It feels too final. Instead, you sit and think and remember. One by one, they come too. See you, lords, ambassadors, bishops. They kneel, they weep, they kiss your hand. You barely register their faces. You ask strange questions now, about the weather, about poetry, about ships sailing west. You never once mention James, but your eyes linger on the maps, on the future. There's one last moment of clarity, brief and piercing. You sit up straighter, you call your council together, and in that moment, that blazing final flicker of the girl who once danced through the tower, you give your final, unspoken gift. You point to James of Scotland just once, and then you close your eyes. They'll say you died peacefully, that you yielded yourself to God, that you passed as a queen should, noble, composed, divine. They won't say how your breath rattled, how your hands clutched at nothing, how the mighty virgin queen died without family, without ceremony, without even a bed. But that's the thing, isn't it? You didn't die like a queen, you lived like one. And that's what they'll remember, the Gloriana, the virgin queen, the woman who outmaneuvered kings, outlived empires, and ruled an island with nothing but fire and steel in her voice. You've left the stage now, but your shadow, it stretches across centuries, and the echoes of your voice still ring in every throne room, every council chamber, every young girl who dares to lead. You were never supposed to survive. You did more than survive. You became England. Your funeral is grand. Of course it is. You wouldn't have stood for anything less. It begins in the grey light of dawn, when London's streets are still cloaked in fog and hush. Mourners in black, their faces drawn and pale, line the roads from Whitehall to Westminster. Even the air feels still, like the very city is holding its breath for you. Your coffin draped in velvet, embroidered with gold, carried on a massive white-draped charioteers, drawn by 4 plumed horses. Behind it walks an effigy of you, clothed in full regalia. The crown, the orb, the scepter. It's so lifelike that people gasp. Some cry, some faint. You would have loved that. Atop the coffin rests the royal arms of England, but also a simple banner, embroidered with your motto, Semper Idem, always the same. There's an eerie calm in the city that day. The bells toll, low and rhythmic. The Thames laps gently at the banks, unaware that its most famous queen is making her final journey. Even your enemies show respect. The French ambassador removes his hat. The Spanish envoy bows his head. You once called yourself a mere woman, but in death, as in life, you command the reverence of kings. As your body is lowered into the crypt at Westminster Abbey, the choir sings softly, and the crowd stands in stunned silence. You are laid to rest beside your sister, Mary, the same sister who imprisoned you in the tower, who feared your name, who tried to snuff you out before your flame even caught. Irony is your final accessory, and, even now, buried in stone and incense and history, you don't go quietly, because no one can agree on who you really were. Historians still argue whether you were England's greatest monarch or a power-hungry autocrat. Some say you built an empire. Others say you merely held it together with stubbornness and spin. Some call you brilliant. Others say you just had brilliant people around you. You don't answer. You've always known the truth lies somewhere, in the silence between their debates. You were a queen made not of fairy tales, but of grit. You turned the chaos of your inheritance, religious war, dynastic unrest, foreign threat into a golden age, or at least something that looked like one. Your legacy isn't clean. It's not meant to be. Yes, you gave patronage to Shakespeare and marveled at his comedies. But you also jailed poets who displeased you. Yes, you presided over exploration, the growth of the navy, and the early pulse of empire. But you also licensed privateers who blurred the line between adventurer and pirate. Yes, you resisted marriage and ruled alone. But you used flirtation like a weapon, keeping foreign princes dangling for decades, just to buy yourself time. You made politics personal and made your person political. There was no separating the two. And yet, you captured imaginations, not just of your subjects, but of the world. They painted you as Astrea, the virgin goddess returned to earth, as Gloriana, radiant and divine, as a phoenix rising from the ashes of her enemies, as the moon shining with borrowed light and unknowable depths. All of them true, and none of them true, because at the end of the day, you were just Elizabeth, a girl who watched her mother die, a teenager, who learned to lie before she learned to dance, a woman who built a throne out of smoke, mirrors, and mind games and, then, ruled from it for 44 years. And you were terrifying. You inspired the kind of fear that had nothing to do with swords or heads on spikes. No, it was subtler than that. You wielded fear like silk soft, elegant, impossible to escape. Your courtiers lived for your smile and died by your glare, and you never let them see you bleed. That's why you're still remembered. Not because you were perfect, because you were impossible. Impossible to dismiss, impossible to break, impossible to forget. Even now, centuries later, school children chant your name, tourists line up to see your portraits. Feminists, monarchists, historians, and playwrights all claim a piece of you. You've become myth, but if they listen closely late at night, when the fog rolls across the Thames and the Abbey bells toll midnight, they might still hear your voice. Low and iron-strong, I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman. Pause, let the silence stretch, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. And with that, you vanish again, not into death, but into legend. You're not even cold in the tomb before they start rewriting your story. It happens quickly, quietly. Papers shuffled, speeches drafted, coins melted and reminted with a new monarch's face. A few advisors sniffle into lace handkerchiefs, then swiftly change allegiance to the rising sun of James I. You always knew this would happen, still. it stings. James of Scotland enters London, under a sky laced with smoke and gold, the air heavy with both celebration and suspicion. He arrives not as a conqueror, but as an heir, your chosen successor, and yet he wastes no time reminding England that he now wears the crown. He moves into your palaces, replaces your closest attendants, reverses some of your policies, but most of all he makes it clear that your cult of personality must dissolve. You were too powerful in death, too beloved to Elizabeth, so they tried to soften you round your edges, paint you more as a careful ruler than a commanding queen. They lean into your virginity, your piety, your grace. The myth tightens. You go from being terrifying to being tame. Or so they think. Because even as the Jacobean court bustles with new accents and foreign fashions, your image refuses to vanish. You linger in ballads, in pamphlets, in secret toasts, whispered behind closed doors. Women wear their hair like you did. Men compare their wives to our late queen, sometimes favorably, often not. And in the shadows, your enemies begin to rise again. The religious tensions you so carefully managed, they bubble up fast. James, unlike you, is not subtle. He's a Protestant, yes, but not your kind. He alienates both Puritans and Catholics, and neither forgets how you kept them all in check with a flick of your fan and a perfectly timed sermon. Plots form. Gunpowder is hoarded. A man named Guy Fawkes becomes infamous. You never would have let it get that far. Historians still argue whether James was truly your intellectual equal, or simply lucky to inherit a kingdom you'd already stabilized. Some say he brought unity to Britain. Others say he just walked into a room you'd already cleaned and took credit. But there's no debate about this. He could never outshine you. In fact, the harder he tried to suppress your legacy, the brighter you glowed. Take the portraits. Your lifetime artists exaggerated your features, elongated your fingers, erased your wrinkles, cloaked you in allegory. But in death, they go full and divine. You become less woman, more icon. A celestial monarch with a globe under your hand and a storm at your feet. One popular engraving shows you standing on the back of a lion, holding the scepter of justice, gazing serenely into eternity. Subtle, right? Schools teach your speeches. Poets write sonnets to your ghost. Foreign visitors compare James to you and not favorably. The Spanish ambassador quips, under her they feared, under him they nap. Ouch, but it's not just nostalgia, it's strategy. England misses you not because you were soft, but because you were sharp, efficient, astute, terrifying when needed. You played Europe's Game of Thrones blindfolded, and still beat them all. Now, with James fumbling his way through English politics like a man trying to dance in wooden shoes, people start whispering. Elizabeth would have known what to do. Of course, you're not there to prove them right or wrong, which makes you even more powerful. They can make you into anything now. A Protestant saint, a feminist icon, a shrewd imperialist, a tragic heroine, the ultimate symbol of England's golden age. And every version has just enough truth to be dangerous. There's even a fringe theory only whispered at court. But it does exist that you didn't die at all, that you faked your death, that the coffin held only stones and symbolism, that you disappeared across the sea to live out your final days free from the burden of the crown. Ridiculous, of course, but flattering, because you were always more than mortal, and now you're unstoppable. As years turn into decades, your reign becomes the benchmark by which all others are judged. Every queen after you, from Anne to Victoria, lives in your long, regal shadow. They are always asked the same question, but is she an Elizabeth? Even centuries later, little girls dress as you for costume balls. Scholars devote careers to decoding your letters. Museums build wings around your gowns, and you become the one thing you never dared dream you'd be, safe. In death, you are no longer feared. You are revered, admired, tamed by time. But if anyone ever reads between the lines, peels back the varnish on the portraits, listens closely to the iron cadence in your speeches, or feels the cold glitter in your painted eyes, they'll know the truth. You were never safe. You were a storm in lace gloves, and no one saw you coming. But even legends must bend to the times. The centuries roll on, and with each new era, your legacy takes another twist. You become a prism. Whatever light shines through you bends in its own direction. And oh, how the light keeps changing. The Victorians adore you. Of course they do. Their queen, also named Elizabeth, Victoria, but very much about female power, looks back at you with curiosity and admiration. You're the original Iron Lady, after all. You held a scepter when women couldn't hold property. You ruled with absolute authority and perfect ruffles. But even they, buttoned up as they are, can't resist reshaping you. Your court becomes a set piece for romantic painters. Your romance, especially the ones you never had, are turned into epic tragedies. The Virgin Queen becomes less of a political strategy and more of a melodramatic identity. You're portrayed as noble, loveless, self-sacrificing. Yawn. If only they knew how hard you laughed behind closed doors, how you tossed off double entendres like they were pearls, how flirtation was your chessboard, not your confession. Historians still argue whether you truly loved Robert Dudley, or simply used him as a decoy for the foreign suitors you had no intention of marrying. Some even suggest he was gay. Others whisper about affairs with young courtiers, or the mysterious dark gentleman of your inner circle. The point is, you never confirmed a thing, not because you were ashamed, because you were in control. Then comes the 20th century, and things really heat up. Suddenly, you're not just a historical figure, you're a movie character. Betty Davis plays you twice, eyes sharp as daggers, voice as dry as your wit. Kate Blanchett reinvents you in golden armor, firelit and trembling, striding through halls of power like a queen turned goddess. They love to show your vulnerabilities, your doubts, your cracking facade. It makes you human, and sure, okay, it's flattering in its way. But let's not pretend any of these actresses could be you. They're playing dress-up. You wore the weight of the world beneath those corsets. They wore makeup and applause. Still, you'd have admired the drama. Meanwhile, the scholars keep digging. They analyze your signatures, your marginal notes in Latin translations, your private prayers written in spidery script in the back of a Bible. They find contradictions. They always do. A queen who wielded divine authority but feared the dark. A woman who crushed rebellions but held onto childhood dolls. A ruler who banned Catholicism but treasured the Virgin Mary's image on her locket. And they ask, was Elizabeth I a paradox? Of course you were. You had to be. Being one thing was dangerous. Being all things. That was how you survived. Modern biographers try to strip away the myth, see the real woman behind the crown. They talk about your insecurities, your loneliness, your aging body beneath the layers of pearl and paint. They forget you made that mask. Every time they try to unmask you, they fall deeper into your trap. You weren't hiding, you were performing, and everyone's still watching. Here's something they almost never notice. Though you didn't just build England's image, you built England's memory. Your reign marked the first real explosion of national identity. You encouraged pageants, funded chroniclers, carefully cultivated your portraits so that even villagers who never saw you in person could see your divine face smiling down from the manor walls. You understood the power of brand before anyone else. The idea fringe detail that often gets overlooked. Your court actually employed a master of the revels, a man whose job was to oversee plays, speeches, celebrations, and censor them. If the narrative didn't suit you, it didn't reach. The public history, curated in real time, no wonder you outlived your enemies. In life and legacy, even now, in the age of algorithms and 30-second videos, your name spikes in search trends whenever a new monarch is crowned or a Netflix show mentions your rivals. You're still relevant and still terrifying, because when modern women see your story, they see the blueprint, the contradictions, the loneliness, the power, the cost, and they think, she did it, a land never gave them what they wanted. You were a woman who refused to be married, silenced or defined by anyone but yourself. How very inconvenient and how very modern, you'd be amused to know. You're now discussed in feminist theory classes. Young students analyze your choices like sacred texts. They debate whether your virginity was empowerment or entrapment, whether your reign was feminist or authoritarian, whether you were a victim of your time or its master. Meanwhile, outside those classrooms, tourists still line up at the Tower of London to gawk at the spot where you were once imprisoned, and the throne you eventually claimed anyway. If ghosts could roll their eyes, you'd be spinning. But deep down, you know this is the game you started. You created a myth so sharp it could cut through centuries. You didn't just rule England, you invented it. Centuries have passed, but somehow your grip never loosens. Each new monarch tries to claim a bit of your glow, borrowing pieces of your legend like accessories from a royal wardrobe. They reference you in coronation speeches. They pose with Tudor roses on their lapels. One modern queen even styled her gowns with subtle Elizabethan echoes, puffed sleeves, high collars, that unmistakable edge of command. You're the original watermark, but the world today is faster, noisier. The age of ink and parchment has given way to the age of scroll and swipe. And yet there you are again. TikTok accounts dissect your love life. Podcasts dramatize your ghostly walkthrough. Hampton Court. Twitter historians argue over your makeup recipe. Spoiler, it contained white lead, which, yes, slowly poisoned you, but fashion over function, darling. Even in this pixelated world, you haunt us. But now the narrative's getting trickier. People start asking tougher questions. They poke at the legacy you left behind like a scab. Your colonial ambitions, the beginnings of the slave trade under your watch, the brutal treatment of the Irish, the censorship, the executions, the high taxes for your endless wars. Modern minds demand nuance, and you never want to be easily pinned down. Give them just enough to debate. Historians still argue whether your foreign policies were driven by defensive necessity or imperial ambition. Were you simply fending off Spain or laying the groundwork for Britain's global dominance? It's a mess of motivations, no clear answers, which is exactly how you liked it. Your fan might as well have been a smokescreen. Let's not forget, your image so carefully crafted was also a shield. Behind the armor, the white paint, the virginal symbolism, was a woman wrestling with migraine headaches, guilt-ridden decisions, and the slow, unrelenting erosion of trust in those closest. To her, you once wrote, "I see my people's love, and I do not deserve it." You probably didn't mean it. Or maybe you did, and that's what made it powerful. It's that contradiction that keeps people talking. You weren't soft, but you weren't stone. You weren't above the people, but you weren't of them either. You were something else, and when the world began to change, when democracy began to whisper at the edges of monarchy, when empires faltered and nations fractured, they still clung to you in World War II. Your portrait was used in propaganda as a symbol of English resistance. You, the Queen who defied Spain, who faced the Armada with steady hands and a rousing speech, became the spiritual ancestor of Churchill's stiff upper lip. Not bad for someone who died 300 years earlier. Even Republicans, those who scoff at crowns and scepters, have a grudging respect for you. You weren't handed power, you earned it, and you held onto it through assassination plots, famine, religious schisms, and a never-ending parade of suitors with agendas. You didn't survive the game, you changed the game. Here's a curious detail. In some alternate history circles, there's a genre called Queen Elizabeth Didn't Die. These stories imagine you outliving James, crushing revolts in your 80s, and forging a female-led empire that spans continents. Some even imagine you founding an international spy syndicate. Because, let's be honest, you'd basically already did that. It's a testament to how deep your myth runs. Even your death isn't seen as final. But let's circle back to something that keeps resurfacing. Fear. You weren't just admired, you were feared. And in many ways, that fear was your sharpest tool. You ruled a council of men who, in another time, would have locked you in a convent or worse. Instead, they bowed. They apologized. They scrambled to make you laugh. Even your fiercest critics chose their words carefully, lest they find themselves imprisoned in the Tower or exiled to rot in Ireland. It's said you once told a courtier, "I may not be a lion, but I am a lion's cub, and I have a lion's heart." They believed you, and you didn't just scare men, you scared Europe. You outmaneuvered Philip II of Spain, arguably the most powerful man of your errand, made his armada sink beneath English waves. You played France against Spain, Scotland against France, and the Pope against them all. They called you that heretic queen. But even in Rome, there was a grudging respect, because you were the one they couldn't control. And that's the core of it. You were the woman who refused every leash. You refused marriage. You refused submission. You refused to be a pawn, even when kings tried to play you like one. And now, in the 21st century, you remain both a monument and a mirror. Women look at you and see strength wrapped in silk. They see choices that cost and courage that outlasts empires. Men study your tactics in leadership seminars, marveling at how you wielded authority without ever raising your voice. Students quote your speeches, artists reinterpret your portraits, writers like me tell your story again and again each time, hoping to get a little closer to the core of your flame. But maybe that's the real magic, that no one ever truly will. Still, for all the power, all the flame, all the myth, you became your end was quiet, not dramatic, not cinematic, just still. You, the woman who spent a lifetime in motion dancing through courtly whispers, fencing with foreign kings, skipping from palace to palace to keep the plague at bay, stopped. It was the early spring of 1603, And you were tired. You hadn't named a successor. You still refused to lie in bed. You stood for hours, silent and withdrawn, draped in black and refusing food. Your advisors begged you to sleep, to sit, to speak. But your silence said more than your proclamations ever had. Some say you knew your time had come. Some say you didn't want to let go. You'd lost so much, your beloved Robert Dudley, your friends, your advisors, your youth, your looks, even your own sense of identity beneath the layers of ceremonial duty. And now, in that last stretch, your mind became a maze. You saw shadows that weren't there. You wept, you prayed, and you stayed on your feet, regal to the last dot. You finally lay down only when you couldn't rise again. They say you died on March 24th, 1603, peacefully, just past the hour when night gives in to dawn. Historians still argue whether you were lucid to the end or lost in fevered dreams. Whether you whispered James's name, your cousin Mary's, son as your chosen heir, or whether that decision was gently made for you after you were no longer able to protest. But either way, the reign of Elizabeth was over. After 44 years on the throne, the golden age had ended, and England, at least for a moment, held its breath. Your funeral was a spectacle, of course. A procession through London, with banners and black horses and nobles who had survived your reign walking solemnly. Behind your coffin, a wax effigy, young, crowned, glorious, was perched above the casket so that people could remember that Elizabeth, not the one who died, but the one who never bowed. Some cried, some breathed sighs of relief. Many whispered about what the new Scottish king would mean for England, but everyone knew something seismic had ended. The virgin queen who had no children left behind 1,000 offspring, not of blood, of idea. Your successors tried to emulate you and failed. James, charming and clever, lacked your charisma. Charles, stiff and absolutist, would lose his head. The monarchy itself would eventually be abolished and restored, but never again with the absolute control you had. Not quite, because no one could do what you did. You hadn't just ruled, you'd shaped the nation in your wake. You left a newly unified England, a Protestant identity, a robust navy, a flowering of English literature, an entire cultural renaissance that bore your name. Even Shakespeare's, we haven't forgotten him, thrived under your rule. His plays, his sonnets, his tragedies and triumphs were often shaped by the politics and anxieties of your court. He knew better than to offend you, but he also knew how to reflect your world, its ambition, its danger, its romance. A fringe fact: there's speculation you wrote some poetry, yourself under pen names, maybe even edited court masks on the sly. Maybe you critiqued Shakespeare's metaphors over supper and dared your court poets to do better. We'll never know. You were always careful where you left fingerprints, and that's the truth about your legacy. It's everywhere and nowhere. Some see you in every powerful woman who walks into a boardroom without apologizing. Some see you in every political leader who survives scandal after scandal by sheer force of will. Some see you in the cautious smile of a woman who knows too much and says just enough. You've become a cipher, an archetype, a warning, an anthem, and yet sometimes the image fades. Centuries move fast now. The world is loud. Your voice, once booming across Europe, sometimes becomes a whisper under digital noise. But every now and then, a rainy day in London, in the marble hush of Westminster Abbey, or deep inside a historical rabbit hole online, someone finds you again. They see a faded portrait, or read a quote, or hear that line you gave before the Armada. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. And they feel the goosebumps rise, because they recognize you, because they need to. You are not a ghost. You are not a painting. You are not even a queen anymore. You are a threshold, a reminder of what happens when the impossible dares to stand upright and say, "Watch me." That's why they feared you, not because you wielded power like a weapon, but because you proved they could never take it back. Centuries on, your throne stands empty but not forgotten. Visitors shuffle through the great halls of Hampton Court, their footsteps soft on the stone. They press hands to cold walls. Some swear they feel your presence, a sudden chill, a whisper of silk, a portrait's gaze that seems just a little too knowing. You're still watching, aren't you? In the quietest corners of England old libraries, candlelit chapels, ivy-wrapped towers, your name lingers like incense. Elizabeth, not just a queen, but the queen, the one whose legacy refuses to lie down, whose story refuses to stay still. The children who feared you are now long dust. The spies you employed have had their codes cracked. Your enemies have become footnotes. Even your lovers, real and imagined, have been picked over by 1,000 documentaries and TikTok theory threads. But you're the mystery that survives the autopsy. People still debate whether you ever truly loved, whether your Virgin Queen image was political theatre or sincere sacrifice, whether you could have chosen a different path and still survived. Historians still argue whether your greatest weapon was your intellect, your gender, your restraint, or your ability to adapt. You weren't a warrior queen like Boudica. You didn't ride into battle in armor. You didn't need to. You made others fight for you, and they did, willingly. So here we are, standing at the edge of your story, trying to distill you into lessons and legacies. You were ruthless, yes. You were manipulative, definitely. You were paranoid, calculating, stubborn to a fault. You made decisions that caused suffering, silenced dissent, and concentrated power so tightly it nearly crushed you. But you also showed a fractured, weary world what it looked like when a woman refused to break. You proved that rule wasn't just a birthright, it was an art form. That strength can be silent, that femininity isn't weakness, that the crown rests heaviest not on the brow, but in the mind of a ruler. And that true fear comes not from tyranny, but from competence so complete that it leaves no room for doubt. They feared you not because you screamed, but because you didn't have to in the end. You were never trying to be loved. You wanted to be remembered. And you are so now, dear Elizabeth. We dim the lights on your long and tangled reign. We lower the banners. We tuck the golden hair back beneath the crown. We fold up the cloak, still heavy with its invisible armor. We let you rest, but only for now, because somewhere, in some midnight history rabbit hole, someone is waking up to your name, and once again they'll wonder, how did she do it? How did a second-born daughter, declared illegitimate, raised in isolation, chased by assassins, betrayed by friends, and surrounded by kingdoms that wanted her dead, how did she become the most feared woman in Europe? And the answer, as always, waits in the shadows, exactly where you liked it. The torches flicker lower now. The court has fallen silent. The crowds that once surged through your story have thinned to soft memory. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of centuries lifting from your chest. You've walked through betrayal and fire. You've stood beneath the crown and understood its cost. You've watched as faith, love, and ambition all collided within the same throne room. Manned, you never flinched. Now, let those images slow. Let the noise fade. The royal court dissolves into velvet darkness. The echo of boots on palace floors is replaced by the hush of wind through old trees. That ink-stained letter lies closed. The jeweled fan rests. There's no more plotting tonight, no. Speeches to deliver, no suitors to outmaneuver. Just silence, and breath, and peace. Maybe now you understand. Fear can protect, but legacy is something softer. It's the candle left burning, the name carved in whispers, the face in a portrait that still commands the room. You're safe now. No daggers, no conspiracies, no need to stand guard. So drift gently as the weight of the crown lifts. Let your heartbeat settle. Let the storm inside you still. The Queen sleeps, and we remember.